the time that individuals are, I will say, asked to sign the monitoring agreement, and I've got mine here that I can read a couple of things off of. At the time that people are sort of put into the monitoring agreement and sign it, it's usually quite early on. It's usually when individuals are still, like myself, had in mind of getting things back to normal, getting back to work, feeling vulnerable, feeling guilty, feeling exposed, feeling quite a large amount of pressure from various facets of their life,
Lots of shame.
Lots of shame. So the monitoring agreement is put in front of them, and they sign it. I don't know any instances of individuals who don't sign the monitoring agreement, but in signing it, and there is language here that really outlines the relinquishing of control and the relinquishing of your right to privacy in virtually every aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And the right to privacy, I mean, in the example that you're giving, is literally your physical privacy, your modesty, but it's also your entire medical history. You can't go to a doctor, you can't get a prescription, you can't go to the hospital for stitches or for a injured foot without letting them know. Like, they now know everything about your health, everything about your health history, about your health present and future, everything. And you sign off that you consent to that. And you're not the one that sort of, it's not a negotiable contract. It's a pretty black and white contract.
Yeah. And the Privacy Act, the way it was described to me, is that we have the right to access our own medical records, and we have a right to have those records protected. And whether or not somebody comes up with a contract and you sign that consent agreement or not, if there is an infraction that involves your information somehow getting to somebody that has a negative impact on your life down the line, that contract will not protect them from a lawsuit. And I didn't know that before, but I've had clients where you may have heard about this too, Corey, where the monitoring company sent their entire medical history in hard copy. They faxed it to just the wrong place. Like they faxed it to a private clinic somewhere on the island. And I mean, there's crazy stuff in there, stuff that could be used to maybe prevent this individual from getting a job at the least. Stuff that could be used for extortion or for identity theft, you name it.
Yeah.
And when I asked what the repercussions were for that kind of a large scale mistake, no repercussions to be found, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's something, I guess, that's always bothered me about the way these contracts are set up so loosely in that regard. You know, you must advise your manager of your situation. You must advise the new manager when they come in. You may be assigned a person who is going to follow you around and watch you. So that's another person that's got to be involved. You have to have your GP. You have to have this. Let's say on average, there's 10 people. If for a nurse, for sure, there's going to be 10 different individuals who know everything about your personal problem here.
Yeah.
Now, if this was a case that went to court, the question would be, did each one of those individuals need to know that information? Was it necessary for them to know, and why?
Yeah.
And then was it reasonable to assume that all those people would keep the confidentiality of that information intact?
Yeah.
Right. And some of these RPAs are written so loosely that it's like, you know, if it's not your doctor, then whoever's there, and you can leave a message, and maybe the attendant. And it wasn't as big of a factor for me because I didn't want to hide from what was going on, but there's a price to pay for that, right? Yes. And some people don't want to pay that price. And we have an act in our Charter of Rights that is supposed to be preventing that from happening. But this is it's overstepping that it's a big overstep there. And then the legal jargon used is basically, it doesn't matter. We're going to do anything.
Well, and Nathan, I was just, as you were speaking, I was just thumbing through my relapse prevention agreement and my monitoring agreement, which are kind of hand in hand. So I've got almost 20 pages here that outline the do's and don'ts for me, that outline the terms of the agreement, urine testing, checking in, support groups, counseling, all that stuff. There's nowhere in these 20 pages that outlines my rights.
No.
Which is kind of fascinating, right? Like it's actually not, we're not just bitter. Like it's not outlined on there. It's not, when I'm signing off that I agree to the terms of the agreement, nowhere am I signing off that I understand what my rights are.
Exactly.
And and 2 months into sobriety and that whole journey, I wasn't empowered enough to give a shit about what my rights were, unfortunately. And I think that's the position I think that healthcare workers are in when they're facing that, is that they're not sort of like, we've talked about how I've talked about how I built the steam to advocate for myself and to like use my voice and stand up for myself. 2 months in, not so much. And well, hold on, what are my rights in this agreement here? I'm signing off that you'll know everything about my health history, that I will give these urine tests twice a month for 3 years after I go back to work, et cetera, et cetera. But do I have a right to, if someone wants to watch me, is demanding to watch me urinate, do I have the right to say no? Do I have the right to have the door closed? Do I have the right, if I can't urinate at that moment, to say, okay, I'm going to wait. I got to wait a few minutes and drink a glass of water or whatever it may be? Those are things that I didn't consider asking. And I kind of wish that I had of. And I think people obviously should have the right to know what their rights are.